Season's greetings to Borowski. Long time really no see. It's been a busy year, but I felt compelled to pop back in this U.S. election cycle just to let them all know I'm still around and kicking. Short of Bernie Sanders, I don't see any contender out there willing to break with the military-industrial serial killer complex. They still advocate continuing the present war, even ramping it up. The reasons for this course are perhaps psychological, as Orwell explored 2 generations ago. And make no mistake, the so-called free world has inherited the totalitarian impulses it so long ascribed to others. But they are also quite practical. Without war, without enemies real or imagined, the American empire will have no reason for existence. The oligarchy running the American show will have no convenient tool to keep the masses in fear and foreboding, and thus easily controlled. Just the other week, I sat in a doctor's waiting room. The TV was blaring on some news channel, not necessarily Fox, and the announcer was warning about the threats to our way of life in the wake of the San Bernardino shootings. All of it was straight out of 1984, but no sinister trappings were necessary. Just the normal everyday environment staffed with normal workaday folk going about their traditional normal business. Yet the rhetoric was as alarmist as any flash bulletin coming over the Big Brother network. This is how it looks in practice, folks. So normal you take it for granted. You don't even smell the manipulation because you've been conditioned to see war and threat as everyday phenomena, as common as that doctor's waiting room and its office furniture. The San Bernardino shootings just seem to prove the necessity of bombing the bejesus out of the Middle East, don't they? Well, a couple of points need to be noted here under the imperial night and fog. Firstly, the only reason all this panic and alarm is because this attack involved Muslim perpetrators against white Christian folk. If it was a mass shooting by white Christians, you can bet the Trumplings of the GOP, the NRA, and all the rest would be in denial that this atrocity was anything to worry about. Just as devastating the Muslim world is nothing we need really worry over. Earlier this month, a white supremacist in Niagara County, New York, blew his own leg off when his homemade IED went off prematurely in his garage bomb lab. Had it not done so, if he had been permitted by kind fate to continue his plot, he would have doubtless put someone else's life at grave risk, someone of lesser import, of course. The most disturbing part of this case is that Niagara County prosecutors are not pursuing terrorism charges against this man. They aren't even calling this a terrorist investigation. They are merely charging him with possessing and manufacturing explosive devices. His professed intent is not even an issue. But you can bet that if he were a Muslim supremacist, his intentions, whether realized in fact or not, would weigh as heavily as his possession of illegal destructive weapons and would be enough for the United States Justice Department to put him away for life. But here we have a supremacist of the right kind caught building IEDs red-handed at home, with at least one of them packed with nails and shrapnel, and even though the U.S. Attorney's Office acknowledged that there aren't many reasons why someone might need to build a bunch of bombs and then pack them with sharp objects, also found at the scene were bullets modified to cause the greatest amount of bodily injury, as well as materials linking him to known terrorist organizations like the Islamic State, Al-Qaeda, no, just the American Nazi Party and the Ku Klux Klan. Authorities are thus not investigating this as a terrorist plot, and thus in his arraignment this holiday week he will not be charged as a threat to our way of life. The possible reasons for this should be painfully obvious. 1. We are dealing with a white male. 2. He is a former policeman and corrections officer. And 3. He's the stepson of a Niagara County, New York legislator. Thus it is possible for our powers that be to show sympathy for him, to try to understand his worries and concerns. That sympathy for white male terrorists runs high in the United States. After all, he looks like the average NRA member, also true in the case of the fanatic who recently killed 3 people and wounded 12 others during the attack on the Planned Parenthood clinic in Colorado. Capturing and prosecuting white supremacists, active shooters massacring school children or abortion clinic patients, or even apprehending drug gang members is off the radar as far as the ruling powers are concerned, though sure they might impact everyday, ordinary people like you and I, 1,000 times more than any foreign-born radical militants. But taking those other miscreants in hand does not serve the needs of empire to baristas, and is therefore much less worthy of surveillance, prevention, arrest, or prosecution. If we could just convert the Mexican drug cartel to Islam, there would be little time lost in wiping them out, and perhaps throwing in a second war with Mexico to eliminate this terrorist threat. After all, Mexico is a major oil producer. So, after all the blood spilled across the Middle Eastern sands in the name of democracy, human rights, women's liberation, secular rationality, has America made the region or the world a better place? Purely a rhetorical question, because intelligent folk like you know that answer. Libya is worse off in terms of life and basic liberty, security of person and livelihood than it was under Muammar Gaddafi. Iraq was better off under Saddam Hussein than after the American Emancipation Proclamation under Bush II. The people of Syria were better off under Assad Jr. before he was fighting for his life. But, Azov, these were all scrofulous tyrants who'd kill you or anyone else who criticized them the way you rag on America. Well, all I can say to that is I'd prefer the present system in the U.S., as flawed and crappy as I know it to be, than liberation by some outsiders' bombs reducing my house to rubble, than fighting for something to eat under the thumb of armed thugs, carving up the leftovers between them, while said foreign power tells me I'm now free and must evermore kiss its ass in gratitude. Better an honest tyranny rather than dishonest freedom. The U.S. has not made Iraq or Libya, Syria or Afghanistan a better place for its peoples or the world a better place for all its humanitarian interventions, nor has it intended to do so. The U.S. empire needs instability and uproar, chaos and terror, outside its borders to justify its force projection, beyond them and thus its existence. Like any neighborhood cop, it feeds off crime as job security. If there's not enough, it can always be made by tweaking the law or exaggerating the threat posed by real malefactors. And the living sustainability for real people is reduced to ashes as part of the collateral other people, namely, again, you and I, must pay. As ISIS and other factions in this region have shown even under the dimmest bulb on the block, once foreign military intervention occurs, it scorches the earth in a way that unleashes new forces and creates new and deadly consequences which can be exploited for purposes of even further intervention. Intervention begets intervention. More intervention is needed to solve the problems caused by intervention, and thus keep our rulers wealthy and us huddled around them in dependent fear. All the better when the consequences of intervention blow back our way, and intervention must extend to home. This is not to justify anyone's terrorist acts, whether perpetrated by Muslim immigrants or native white folk. As an aside, you'll notice only white people are overly concerned about the Muslim threat. Do a poll among blacks or Hispanics or Orientals and see how low Islamic extremists, Sharia law, and all the rest register on their social and political radar. The only terrorism they see comes in the form of domestic powers, police, courts, agencies that are supposedly protecting us from those evil others outside. Well, it seems my old friends haven't forgotten me either. Hello, who in the hell is this? General Augusto Pinochet? The old Chilean tyrant who tortured and terrorized his way into power 40 years ago. What's that? You're calling from hell. To say I finally come around to your way of thinking, that your tyranny is preferable to the hypocritical human rights rhetoric coming out of Washington now. Well, I hear you. But a couple of things. First off, you used Washington bombs to put yourself in power in Santiago, overthrowing a peaceful civilian government. True, that was a socialist government, and to the U.S., therefore, is as evil as Assad in Syria for that reason. But you and I, we both know the bullshit in that story. And you didn't have the audacity to claim you were fighting for human rights. Nixon and Kissinger in those naive days weren't cynical enough to make those claims in their White House for you. You were at least honest in your regime change ambitions, which were all about power and protecting privilege. As a veteran Latin American dictator, I don't need to tell you that when the empire comes calling in the name of human rights, instead of answering the call, we should all be running the other way and taking cover as quickly as possible.